Hello and welcome to Sustainability Marketing Lecture 10 on Convenience. And this is episode 2, looking at packaging. It's part of our look at the sustainability marketing mix as part of the total sustainability marketing management process. In terms of this lecture, in the last episode we looked at the overall process of making consumption convenient for consumers. In this episode we'll be looking at packaging in particular, its role in delivering consumer convenience, and also some of the sustainability challenges that packaging creates. And then finally, we'll be looking in the third episode at a case study of the Family Mart store's convenience chain in Japan. In terms of learning outcomes, from this episode, I'd hope that you'd be able to understand the role that packaging plays in delivering consumer convenience, and in terms of its impact on the sustainability performance of particular sustainability solutions that companies develop. The second outcome would be being able to consider how marketers can reduce the environmental impacts of their products and services through packaging reduction in ways that don't compromise consumer convenience. In terms of the structure of the episode, first we'll look generally at issues of packaging and convenience before thinking about the role that packaging plays in generating waste. And then finally, in terms of looking at how companies can develop sustainable packaging solutions. So if we think about packaging as a whole and the way in which it delivers convenience, well, packaging is one of the great features of modern life. You know, if you go to a supermarket, everywhere around you, you will see packaging. And just try and imagine life without it. Imagine going to the supermarket and thinking about how are you going to get your coffee home, or your milk, or your cornflakes, or almost any product that you would buy. Without packaging, it would be impossible. So packaging is a key element of modern consumption and production, but unfortunately it does also provide some key sustainability problems. If we look across European countries, for example, around something like 20 to 36% of municipal waste that goes into landfills in different European countries is just discarded consumer packaging. So there's a tremendous environmental burden that's associated very directly with packaging. We also know it's an issue that concerns consumers. If you look at research into what environmental issues and what sustainability issues are of concern to consumers, packaging and excess packaging comes out very strongly in consumer surveys. Consumers worried, for example, that paper and card is associated with destruction of forests, or that plastic will endure in the environment for a very long period of time. So there's a very considerable environmental set of concerns linked to packaging. There's also the issue of litter, where packaging just becomes discarded out into the environment to become litter. And that should also be a real concern for marketers, because at the point your packaging becomes litter, you know, the brand and the brand image and the logo that you've so carefully nurtured as part of a customer solution has suddenly become another type of problem. You know, a problem in towns and cities of litter blowing around in the environment and really sending a very negative message about a problem to consumers. You know, so for both consumers, you know, for citizens and for companies, there's a real sense of a need to ensure that packaging, you know, does not become litter, does not become waste, and that its environmental impact is reduced. In terms of the role that packaging plays for the marketer, it is actually surprisingly versatile. Packaging does maybe far more for us than we realise. To a large extent, it protects goods. It protects the integrity and the quality of products. The products often have to make a long, sometimes international journey from the producer to reach the consumer. Along the way, it will have to go through various modes of transport and storage before eventually being there on the supermarket shelves for you to select. So products often need a great deal of packaging, not just the packaging that you see on the shelf, but also transit packaging to ensure that it arrives in good condition to reach you as a consumer. So it doesn't just protect it on the shelf, it also protects it throughout the entire supply chain. It also has a very important selling and communication function, that within a typical supermarket, not even a giant hypermarket, but a typical supermarket will have something like 40,000 different products on its shelves. Each product trying to attract the attention and the interest of the customer. So packaging forms a very important part of the marketing communications process, as well as delivering convenience, because it's there to attract the eye of the customer, communicate through them to them through things like labeling, through things like ingredients. It'll tell customers about country of origin, for example, as well as simple information about the quantity and quality of the products that they're buying. It also portions products into convenient quantities for use or storage. So, if you want milk, you can go and buy half a litre or 1 litre or 2 litres or 4 litres, depending on what you use. And that packaging plays a very important role in giving consumers choice in terms of the quantities of things they buy. But also increasingly with packaging innovations, we're seeing the packaging itself leading to new types of product and new ways of consuming products. So you see it in foods, for example, with convenience foods, whereby particular types of packaging, which perhaps can go straight from a freezer to a microwave oven or even a conventional oven, allows the production of ready-prepared meals, which can very conveniently be taken from the freezer into the microwave or oven to be cooked, often very quickly, very conveniently for the consumer. So the packaging can actually lead the product as well as the product just demanding a certain type of packaging. And you might think that convenience foods, for example, are necessarily worse for the environment than cooking a meal individually from ingredients fresh in the kitchen, as it were. Actually, it's not as simple as that. If you do the environmental ecological footprint analysis for a pre-prepared ready meal that's been cooked in a huge batch where it's relatively energy efficient to one that's been prepared fresh in the kitchen individually, the trade-off of environmental benefits is actually much more complex and more narrowly sort of subject to narrower margins than one might expect. I think I would naturally tend towards the freshly cooked one for sort of consumer taste and health preferences anyway. But it isn't as simple a case as just because something is packaged or pre-packaged for convenience that it's necessarily worse for the environment, because, as I say, the calculations in terms of environmental burden are quite complicated. It does mean, however, though, that the packaging industry has found itself under considerable pressure because of the role that packaging plays in terms of generating waste, generating litter. So as an industry, it's tried to become much more conscious of sustainability problems and developing more sustainability-orientated solutions. But I think for the industry and for companies and for marketers, really the question very often is, can we reduce the packaging with which a product is associated with, or can we find new ways of developing packaging that are less environmentally damaging, but still protect the product and not compromise on its protection and the integrity of the products? Because there have been some instances where packaging has been reduced to such an extent that the actual core product has then become damaged, and that leads to waste, which itself is environmentally wasteful. So it's interesting for packaging designers. They have this real balancing act of, can they reduce the packaging to the optimal amount where it still protects the product while having the least environmental burden? In terms of strategies for reducing the impact of packaging, there are different ways in which packaging can be optimized. One is just making it very effective, very fit for purpose, so there's no excess, no superfluous packaging. And if you look at the supermarket shelves today, you will find far less products tending to be a bottle that comes also inside a cardboard box, that typically a single layer of packaging is the way the industry has moved towards. To be efficient in terms of reducing the use of energy of materials in the packaging, or energy and water in developing the packaging. A move towards more recycling systems to reclaim old packaging material in order to recycle it, and also to ensure that it's safe, that it doesn't involve pollution of the environment, and that it doesn't involve any risk to human health in its development or its use. So there are very different strategies for developing more sustainable packaging that companies and companies within the packaging industry as well can address. One of the favourites has been to actually reduce the amount of material that goes into the package. So if you look at steel cans that are used for products like soups or canned foods, for example, if you look at plastic bottles, you look at glass that's been used for things like wine bottles, that over time we've seen a reduction of the thickness of the material used. And here's an example over the last sort of nearly 30 years of usage of steel in steel cans for food, that there's been about a 28% reduction in the thickness since 1986. So today we have cans that still protect the food perfectly well, but are far less environmentally, have far less of an environmental burden in terms of the steel used and the energy that's gone into it. And in terms of, similarly, the use of cardboard, in terms of how much cardboard is used per gram of food that it's protecting, you're seeing a 6% reduction since 1998. And you also have some very innovative solutions being developed by companies who maybe come up with completely different ways of packaging a particular product. A good example comes from HP with their laptops, and they were responding to a strategy that Walmart had developed as a retailer, and we talked in the previous episodes that retailers increasingly are working with their supply chain to try and get companies to develop innovative solutions. In this case, Walmart had an eco-challenge for its suppliers of coming up with ways of reducing environmental burdens, including on packaging. And HP in France came up with a very simple solution, was that most consumers who buy an HP laptop will also buy a bag to keep it in later on. And so they thought, well, why not combine the two? Why not actually sell the laptop in a laptop bag rather than selling both products in a cardboard box that the consumer then has to throw away later on? And this was a very successful initiative, and the reduction in packaging that went with this strategy was 97%. So, it was very simple. It still delivered consumer convenience just the same way, and in fact more so, because the customer didn't have a whole range of cardboard boxes they had to get rid of when they bought their laptop and their laptop bag. So packaging reductions can actually help to increase consumer convenience from that point of view as well, in terms of removing waste disposal problems. One of the more interesting issues within the world of packaging is what we might call the humble plastic shopping bag. That it's a product that's really become emblematic, iconic within the sustainability marketing debate, particularly in terms of retailers and their strategies. Several billion plastic shopping bags are produced and consumed every year, many of them thrown away. In some countries, they create considerable problems in terms of, for example, being washed into the sea, causing problems for marine wildlife who eat them. The typical plastic bag does not degrade very quickly. So there's something that has caused real problems in terms of litter and perceptions of waste, for example. And a whole variety of solutions have been proposed by companies, by governments, seeking to reduce the number of plastic shopping bags that we consume. So in some countries and some districts of some countries, there have been bans put in place that single-use plastic shopping bags have become illegal. In some countries, you now have to pay for them. So for example, in Ireland, if you use a plastic shopping bag, you have to pay a 5-cent charge. And within Wales, they've also introduced a similar thing that you have to pay 5 pence for a single-use plastic shopping bag. Individual retailers have had their own strategies of either charging customers for plastic bags or rewarding them with things like loyalty points for reusing their own bags, or in some cases just using strategies of trying to persuade customers at the tills to use less. In other cases, training checkout staff how to pack goods in ways that use fewer bags. The most popular one is moving towards a bag for life strategy of trying to encourage consumers not to rely on single-use shopping bags, but to have a shopping bag they bring for multiple trips and that is treated as a bag for life and really as part of the overall customer service that the retailer offers. When we look at the example of Family Mart in the third episode, that was one of the problems that they wrestled with, was really how to try and wean their customers off plastic shopping bags. But there are a variety of different strategies that companies have adopted, and a variety of organisations have treated the plastic shopping bag as this sort of iconic target for pressure. And we'll just have a little look at a video showing, taking a humorous look at the phenomenon of the plastic shopping bag and its life cycle. So that shows you something of the life cycle of the plastic bag and an example of it becoming an icon, really, in the debate about sustainability and marketing. It's perhaps symptomatic, though, of a wider trend in sustainability and marketing to focus on packaging as an issue that doesn't really affect the core benefits that customers get from particular products. It's perhaps interesting that packaging has been such an arena for pressure and often for action by companies and consumers and other organisations, because if we change the packaging of the products that we buy, we haven't really changed the core nature of those products. So it's an area that marketers have felt they can change in a way that's relatively risk-free for them. They're not trying to get their customers to consume a radically different form of product or to change their consumption in any very radically different way. They've just presented the same products to them with reduced packaging, or perhaps packaging that's biodegradable or that's recycled, or that is in some ways improved from the conventional packaging they had before. And we're seeing the rise of things like biodegradable packaging, biodegradable plastics, glass containers that can be reused for other purposes, for example. So we're seeing a lot of changes in packaging. I think one of the difficulties is there's a limit to how far that can go, that eventually all the packaging improvements will have been made, and the next generation of improvements that marketers want to make to their products will perhaps need more radical changes to the core product itself and the production processes and supply chains behind them. Another reason that the humble plastic shopping bag is maybe a distraction from some of the more important sustainability and marketing issues is that those plastic shopping bags are developed from oil as a source, and so there tends to be figures provided saying so many million barrels of oil is used to make these plastic shopping bags. But curiously enough, the ethylene from which the plastic shopping bags are made is actually a waste product. So it's something that the oil companies are trying to find a practical use for, rather than these plastic shopping bags accounting for so much usable oil that would otherwise have some other economic benefit. So I would say yes, packaging issues are important. Plastic shopping bags are not unimportant, and yet they're not really the main event in terms of moving consumers towards a more sustainable form of consumption. So they're important in terms of the convenience they provide. They're important in terms of there are opportunities to improve sustainability performance in the arena of packaging, and yet they shouldn't really distract us from some of the more substantive environmental impacts that retailers, that producers, and the products that they produce and that we consume actually have. In terms of dealing with post-use products, as I mentioned in a previous lecture, that often it's asking consumers to do something when they finish using a product that is where you're doing something different to the form of consumption that maybe people engaged in before. And that just throwing something into the bin is maybe very simple for consumers. Dealing with post-use products and packaging in more sustainably does provide a bit of extra challenge. It may just simply be sorting them out so that you put your paper packaging in one bin, your plastic packaging in another bin, and your cans in another bin. But you are actually asking your consumer to do something a little more than they did once upon a time. So in terms of reviewing that particular episode on packaging, I think we considered some of the benefits that packaging provides for marketers and their customers, and you can think a little about those and maybe what other benefits you might like from packaging. In terms of the strategies that marketers can adopt to develop more sustainable packaging solutions, and then really we looked at the issue of plastic bags, an issue that regulators, retailers and shoppers have all taken an interest in, but trying to decide, well, to what extent is it a real issue, or to what extent is it a distraction? And that's something you might like to have a bit of a debate about with your friends. In terms of the referencing for this episode, obviously the 10th chapter of our book, Sustainability Marketing, is all about convenience with, there is an element of packaging within that chapter. There's a great deal of information about packaging from the Sustainable Packaging Alliance report, Principles, Strategies and KPIs for Packaging Sustainability, which looks at a whole range of different types of packaging and packaging materials, and some of the issues in terms of trying to move the whole packaging industry towards sustainability. And finally, Jedlicka's book from Wiley on packaging sustainability, tools, systems and strategies for innovative packaging design, very much looking at how the choice of materials and the use of packaging design that companies developed can play a substantive role in moving companies towards developing and delivering more sustainable solutions for their customers. So, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.